We are finally coming to the final panel. And I have the opportunity of introducing the speaker who really doesn't need introduction. If you are in the industry, you know him. If you're in academia, you should also know him. If you are in both, then you definitely know him. I'm talking about Geoffrey Lipman, whom I have known from a distance for many years, and eventually in person. And we have managed to work with each other on a number of ongoing projects. Well, not all of them. One of them is, two of them are ongoing. But I've had the pleasure of working with him since his earlier times. Nevertheless, though you know him, I would like to introduce him. And then I give the microphone to Geoffrey. Geoffrey has occupied many positions. I call them path-making positions or map-making positions, if you wish. Some of the highlights of his positions in the past is he was the former executive director of International Air Transport Association, known to everybody. An association which has been extremely active and on the top of everything, not only just in air transportation, but in tourism in general. Then president of the World Travel and Tourism Council. This is the counterpart of, in a way, counterpart of UNWTO, except that this one has commitment to the tourism industry, advancement of the industry. And actually, with the efforts of WTTC, people got to know the volume of tourism in the number of amounts of export imports due to tourism, arrival, departures, I mean. The number of employment that was magnified through WTTC. So tourism industry got a new image, a more appropriate image for its size and magnitude through WTTC. Then he worked as Assistant General Director of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, or the only United Nations tourism agency that we have, under the umbrella of the United Nations. And that's when I got working with him a bit more closely. Whenever I went to Madrid, we had the opportunity to meet, and then we met in some other meetings of WTO. He is the co-founder of the SUNx Strong Universal Network, a subject that is connected to his topic today. And he's definitely an advocate climate resilience. Again, that will shine throughout his presentation. My description of him is that he's not a type of one-size-fits-all situations. He modifies it to the situation, to the occasion, and to the country. And I'm sure he's going to demonstrate that when he talks about sustainable development goals. We are really fortunate to have Geoffrey Lipman to be part of the concluding session of our 3-day seminar, of T-Forum seminar. And in my opinion, it's just the right time to say that Geoffrey has the last word. So Geoffrey, may I invite you to share your insightful ideas on such a glorious day, and you know what I'm talking about tourism, about better possibilities for the attention of the world being focused on climate change and all the challenges that we need to face in order to protect the only planet we have, planet Earth, our home, for the next generations. And he's very conscious about, he has done for this generation plenty, and he wants to do much also for the next generation. He actually refers to them as kids because he wants to make it more sincere and ingrained. Geoffrey, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. I hope you can hear me.
Clear.
I'm trying now to share my screen. And can you please tell me if you are seeing my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, first of all, let me thank you, Geoffrey. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, to be in your company, to learn from you, to break bread, and most importantly, to drink wine with you. And you're quite right, we have only become real friends in the last few years, but it's a friendship that I value very much. And I have seen the dedication that you have given to the T-Forum system, and I'm really happy to be able to be a part of it and to be with you at this conference. Point one. Point two, I'm very happy to be with you in spirit in the wonderful Algarve, and with the excellent new friends that I've made at the university who put so much into this conference. And Portugal is becoming a very important player in European tourism, and European tourism under the drive of the Green New Deal is, I hope, going to become increasingly a determinant of the shape of global tourism. And Portugal has a big vision, excellent leaders. The Secretary of State, Luis, the private sector, our friends from Pestana who we've worked with, they're all out-of-the-box thinkers. And so it's a pleasure to be with you. And last but not least, it's a great pleasure to be able to give this keynote on the day when the orange moron, who has been allegedly the leader of the free world, Donald Trump, an enemy of our grandchildren, is finally going to be kicked out of office. So just before we came on air, the map, the landscape of the American election system shifted decisively in favor of Joe Biden, a man who said the first thing that he will do is will re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement, that Donald Trump, the agreement that you all know, has been designed to deal with the existential climate crisis, which is the subject of our talk today. And Donald Trump pulled America, the biggest polluter, pulled America out of the Paris Climate Agreement. And Joe Biden has said that the first thing he's going to do is to take them back in again. So this is a big day for our grandchildren. Let me first of all put the climate crisis in today's context. In today's context, the world economy and travel and tourism as a very important part of that global socio-economic activity, not just the 10% of the jobs and the GDP that we developed, the methodology for calculating that inside the WTTC back in the 90s, but not just that, but the whole underpinning of the social structure of society, the interrelationship of countries, of people, the development agenda. Tourism is an integral part of that. And our world has hit a wall. And that wall is a result of C-19, COVID-19. And every effort of decision makers outside our silo of travel and tourism, every effort is focused on defeating this pandemic. And in my slide, I have referred to the pandemic. It's as if suddenly somebody plunged a knife into the body of humanity. And it's quite right, and we have to respond to it, and leaders have to respond to it, and industry has to respond to it, and as individuals we have to respond to it, because it is like a war. And I want to just make one side point here. All of the speculation of when it's going to end, as far as I'm concerned, is nonsense. We don't know when it's going to end. We haven't sussed out exactly how it impacts us. And it's as if somebody when people come on and say it's going to end in such and in 6 months, in 12 months, it's as if somebody in 1942 in Europe said the war's going to end in 3 months or 5 months. Or you know it's ended when it's ended. And we'll know that about COVID-19. But whilst this has been affecting us, this other crisis, the climate crisis, has not disappeared in any shape or form. All of the dramatic issues that have been identified by world scientists, by world leaders, by the G7, by the World Economic Forum, by Greta Thunberg, and the young activists, has still been going on. And people who are thoughtful analysts of this situation, the scientists particularly, but many politicians too, they tell us we have got 7 years to get our act together. And that's why. Because the climate crisis will be like the COVID crisis on steroids. So what we have to do as a global society and as an industry particularly, we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to respond to the immediate pressures of the COVID situation whilst continuing to put in place the strategic transformation issues that are necessary to deal with the climate crisis. And I'm not going to go into any great detail about what those impacts are. You know them as well as I do. In some places it's drought. In other places it's floods. In some places it's hurricanes. In other places it's forest fires. It's ice melting in the polar regions. And it's 10 million climate refugees over the past decade. And this is because, in simple terms, for 100 years, industrial society has been putting a blanket of carbon around the world and other, not just carbon, but other greenhouse gases. And inside that blanket, things have been heating up in ways that haven't been experienced before. And the biggest single impact is on our planetary weather systems, the very essence of which has been the basis of tourism for the past 100 years. If there's one known predictability, it has been weather patterns. People go to the Algarve because they know it's going to be warm, when it's going to be cold in Northern Europe. All of that is changing. People knew about the hurricane season in the Caribbean, and it's still there. It's just more intensive, more extreme, and more dangerous. And in the yellow box, you can see that from a tourism perspective, it's affecting lifestyles, it's affecting all the products, it's affecting everything about visitor patterns, and it's affecting the very communities which are the essence of the tourism product. It's affecting everything, everywhere. And the scientists are 99% convinced that this is a reality. And this is the theme of my presentation today. This is an existential threat. COVID-19 is a terrible threat. Very bad for the economy. People are dying, and tourism is running at 70 to 80% of what it has historically been running at. But it's not existential. It will be manageable when, in the short term, it's manageable by procedures, and in the medium term, it will be manageable when there is a vaccine. And when that vaccine is produced and distributed globally on a basis that allows society to get the same kind of predictable immunities as we get from the flu. And no one knows when that is. And Donald Trump has been lying about it for the past 6 months, and that distorts everything because the leader of the free world has a loud voice. If you look at this slide on the what is my left-hand side of the screen, it may well be your right-hand side, the reddish line, which is going up quite steeply, is kind of the business as usual and the Paris 2 degrees scenario. And in that line, we are caught. We're caught. Our kids, if you look from 2020 to 2040, our kids are caught. And our grandkids are just dead. It doesn't matter whether, and we don't know, because of the uncertainty and unpredictability of these macro weather changes, we don't know if those grandkids will freeze or fry. And that's why the Paris Climate Agreement and the scientific underpinning said we have to collectively reduce our temperatures of the planet by 2050 well below this 2 degrees yellow line you see there, and we have to produce the blue line. And the only way that we can produce that is by society responding collectively to this challenge And within that framework, tourism has to play its part. Tourism is not special, it's just a part of humanity, of society, and we do a lot of lobbying that tells people that it's special. I'll tell you a story. During the time when the World Trade Organization was being reformed, I had a lunch with the then Director General, Peter Sutherland, who was a longtime friend of mine. And we were talking about how tourism would fit into the new World Trade Organization. And I was at that stage, I think I was working with the World Travel and Tourism Council. And I said, yes, but we have very special characteristics in tourism. We had a very good paper which set out the special characteristics, including the jobs and the economy and the anti-poverty and the gender equality. All the stuff you can see nowadays, it's the same thing, it just has a different cover on it. And I said, you know, we have these special characteristics, and he was an Irishman, and he laughed at me. And he said, if I could tell you how many people like you come into this organization and tell me that I should create rules for the society, for the world at large, except they have special characteristics. He said, if I took account of everybody's special characteristics, there wouldn't be anything in the agreement. Tourism has its own characteristics, and we have to advocate for them, and we have to make our adjustment taking account of them. But in many respects, we are just another sector of the economy. I want to talk to you a little bit about what I call the Strong vision. Strong, as in Maurice Strong, who was a collaborator, colleague, and friend of mine, and who I believe helped to create what is truly a long-term strategic vision for society about how to become sustainable. This swoosh, as I call it, charts in simple terms the major events which have brought sustainable development and climate resilience into our common lexicon, our common language, our common understanding. And Maurice Strong was the father of this system. In 1972, he was the first Secretary General of the first United Nations Environment Conference, the Stockholm Environment Conference. It was the same time as the Club of Rome was producing its report on the limits to growth. And from that Stockholm conference came the United Nations Environment Programme. Maurice Strong was the first Secretary General, Executive Director of UNEP. He took the organization to Africa, the first UN agency to be headquartered in Africa. And he, from the foundations that he built in Stockholm, he built a new foundation in UNEP. When the Brundtland Commission in 1987 was trying to look at what is sustainable development and how do you define it, Maurice Strong was a member of that commission. And in 1992, when the defining multilateral meeting was held to put an agenda for the 21st century, Agenda 21 together, it was Maurice Strong who was the Secretary General of the Rio Earth Summit. He was heavily involved in the Kyoto agreement, which was the basis of the UNFCCC and its climate thinking. He was an advocate of the UNFCCC at Rio. He was an advocate of the IPCC, the Scientific Committee, and his thinking was incorporated into the Millennium Development Goals in 2000. And the Millennium Development Goals set a pattern for the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. The SDGs with their 2030 targets, I'll talk a little bit about them in the next slide, and the 2050 targets of the Paris Agreement, and SDG 13, which is climate action. Maurice Strong didn't decide all these issues, but he was the visionary and the inspiration behind them. In 1972, Maurice Strong was talking on the BBC about climate change being existential 75 years ago. So that's the vision. That's the man. That's a book which is full of tributes from the good and the great. When Maurice Strong was 80, IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, held an event in Geneva simply called the 80th. And 80 of Maurice Strong's closest friends and the deepest thinkers on environmental issues around the world were gathered in Switzerland to pay tribute to this man. And Maurice Strong, who I worked with for 25 years and who was a great fan of travel and tourism, Maurice Strong was the inspiration behind the not-for-profit Strong Universal Network, which 18 months ago, thanks to the vision of my friends in the Malta Tourism Authority and the Ministry of Tourism, made a liaison to create a plan for our kids to put a total focus on climate resilience. Last year, working with the World Travel and Tourism Council, we produced our first annual report on what we called climate-friendly travel. Low carbon, SDG linked, and Paris 1.5 trajectory. This is a sector review for travel and tourism of how it fits in to the evolving global system. And basically, in simple terms, it said climate change is existential, public concern, government concern is right, the tourism sector has a strong role to play, and it is behind the curve. We have to do more, we have to do things faster, and we have to have structures and systems which encourage us to play our part in the societal response. About a month ago, the Secretary General of the United Nations talked about recovery from COVID. And he talked about the tourism sector. And he said, the tourism sectors, I quote, a Portuguese Secretary General, I might say, Antonio Gutierrez, who was a strong supporter of travel and tourism when he was Prime Minister of Portugal. He was the keynote speaker at a meeting that WTTC held in the Algarve in the early 90s, and is now a leader of our global society. And Antonio Gutierrez said that when travel and tourism recovers and helps the world recover from COVID-19, that recovery must be climate friendly. And we call this a green and clean pathway to recovery. It starts with the Sustainable Development Goals. And just to focus on that for 1 second, the Sustainable Development Goals are really redesigning the future of everything on the planet. 17 goals, 169 targets, 200 plus indicators about every facet of humanity, and it has a 2030 time perspective. The world has created a time frame. And within these goals, one of them, goal 13, is climate action. That is where we have focused our climate-friendly travel system. And it has 2 pillars, a green pillar, the Sustainable Development Goals, and a clean pillar, the Paris 1.5 Agreement. That's our framework. And this is the system that we have developed at SUNx Malta for every travel and tourism company and community to craft its contribution to climate-friendly travel. Every company, every community, big and small. And the first thing is they have to make a governance commitment to climate-friendly travel. Not just nice words in brochures, but a commitment to transformation. The second thing is they have to make a plan which they register on a registry that we have created, working with the UNFCCC as the gateway for travel and tourism to position itself within the global transformation. That registry was launched by the Minister of Tourism and Consumer Protection from Malta, Giulia Farrugia Portelli, by Gloria Guevara, the President and CEO of WTTC, and by Patricia Espinosa, the Executive Director of the UNFCCC, the UN Climate Agency, last month. We expect every travel and tourism company and community to join that. The third thing we ask people to do is to support what we call a diploma trailblazer. Inside the World Economic Forum, they call these young shapers. A young, smart, bright student. We created a diploma, first ever diploma in climate-friendly travel, with ITS in Malta, the Institute of Tourism Studies. And even at this moment, we have our first one-year online course with 45 students from 30 countries learning to become qualified in climate-friendly travel. And last but not least, they must inspire strong climate champions, our own Greta Thunbergs. We can't afford as a sector to be left behind. We have to have a transformation through young people, through students, and this is our plan. The registry is the entry point. On this slide, what you can see is the black line shows business as usual for our sector. The green line shows Paris 1.5, which is where we have to get to. And the registry is the entry point for this activity. It's a place where people file their own plans. There's not going to be a magic one-size-fits-all global plan for responding to climate change. It's going to be company-specific and community-specific, but it has to be real. It can't just be greenwash. And we've provided a capacity for entering the global system through this registry. And we've put in place mechanisms for support to show people innovation, strategy, learning systems, and to provide visibility for those people who register. Because at the end of the day, visibility and transparency will become the key criteria for this transformation. This transformation has to come from the bottom up, not from the top down. And beneath this yellow box, you see the climate-friendly travel badge that we will be providing to people who register, and a copy of the Earth Charter created by Maurice Strong. The second thing, and my last slide, is the Strong Climate Champions. Through the diploma, we plan to put 100,000 smart, bright young people in all UN states by 2030. We will train the trainers through our diploma, and when they go back, we will work to find internships for them so that they can become organizers in their own countries of strong climate champions. This is the only way I believe we can cement the transformation. And finally, last but not least, we're building this diploma not just with the vision of Maurice Strong, but with the vision of Geoffrey. Too much of academia is academic. Too much of business is profit-oriented. Our friend Geoffrey has had this vision manifest in the Tea Forum conference, but also in everything he does and writes and projects, that we must put more academia into business and more business into academia. And we are making this a basis of our diploma. We're happy that Geoffrey will be giving some lectures to our students online. And we want to help bring the spirit of the Tea Forum conference into the climate-friendly travel philosophy, into the education system, and outwards to a much broader community of our own Greta Thunbergs over the next decade. So with that, I thank you for inviting me here, Geoffrey. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and I'll stop there. Thank you. I think you're muted, Geoffrey.
As always, you're right.
I love it. Will you repeat that?
Yes, thank you very much, Geoffrey. There are some other microphones on. If you please, everybody turn your microphones off. I thank you on behalf of the T Forum participants, our host, our co-founder, for your elaborate, comprehensive, insightful talk. It is something, a message that tourism is yet to hear, and more so to wake up to the message and start walking. It's easy to say something, but we have to walk our talk. And you are one of those who walks the talk with your SUNx Malta, with the certificate program, with all they have lined up. Productivity is built into it. You want, at the end of the day, you want results. And I know this is how you work, and it is working. The challenge is really big, but opportunities are also many more. Our students, since I have a sense of our students on the daily basis, I have been with them. They have a better sense of climate and climate change than their parents. And this is rewarding. The message would go stronger to them. I know many universities actually who have a number of courses that deal with sustainability, which includes, climate change. I don't want to give a talk on the basis of your talk. I want people to have the opportunity to ask you a few questions before we break out to go to our panel discussion. So if you have any quick questions, please address them to Geoffrey. And you need to open your mic if you have a question.
Hi, I just typed my question. So I will repeat that. This is Dori Davari. I'm a PhD student at Purdue University. Thank you for the great talk. It's actually very thought-provoking for myself that we talk again and again about sustainability. Many of our tourism scholars and pioneers in sustainability. At the same time, I have had personal conversations with them, asking them, why is this class so hot? Why should students wear t-shirts when they are in your class? We take a look at the figures regarding energy consumptions in different countries. Specifically in the US, we see that we consume, I reside in the US, so I say we consume 3 times more than China. So has this captured your attention in the events that you have attended, focusing on sustainability and then being in the environment that you may think that the attendees are contributing to a worse situation regarding climate change? Isn't this thought-provoking?
I think, Dori, you raised 2 points. The first point is, should there be an interdisciplinary approach? And the second point is, should we walk the talk? I think that's what you're really saying. And
exactly, yes.
And I think the answer on both counts is yes. You cannot look at sustainability as a simple component of human activity. Historically, there has always, since 1990, and John Elkington created the concept of the triple bottom line, that you have to have a balance between economic, social, and environmental issues. Sustainability has to be integrated into the economy and vice versa, and also integrated into social issues. And I have argued that in fact climate change creates a quadruple bottom line because it cross-cuts all of those activities. And if we don't fix it, everything else that we do will be like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. So we need to have a holistic approach. And that's why I believe the SDGs provide this. But the SDGs are not simple. You know, there's 17 of them, and a typical one is life on land. You know, it's easy to say, but it is complicated. It is differentiated. Human beings have their unique, specific perspectives, and that's just one. And it's very, very important, I think, that as we develop this interdisciplinary approach, we understand that everybody's approach is going to be marginally different. If you are a resort in Mauritius, life underwater is really important to you. But if you're a hotel in the city center, that will not be so important to you. Waste management will be important to both of them. Climate resilience will be important to both of them. So I think even as we take an interdisciplinary approach, people have to recognize that each individual unit, each company and each community will have to develop its own plan with its own specific goals, its own targets, and its own indicators. And that's why our contribution, if you like, is to create a registry where people can register those plans, and they can be transparent, and they can be reviewed on a routine basis. That's the first point. The second point, yes, we have to walk the walk, but we also have to be realistic about all of this. This is not something that is designed to happen today or tomorrow. We have to start the process today, but the vision is 2030, 2050. I know I will be dead when the real results of the climate resilience by our sector come into being. So we shouldn't become too religious about whether people are watching their carbon, how much carbon they're going to use when they're flying. Each individual, each company has to develop its own approach. And it's, from my perspective, I'm not, as I say, I'm not too concerned about what you do or what Jafar does. I have to be concerned about what I do. So that's my response to your question. It's yes and yes. The first yes on the interdisciplinary nature is a big, big, big yes. The second yes, you know, we live in a funny world. It's a lumpy world. The markets are complicated. And you can't heat the ocean. You can't boil the ocean. You just have to do what you can do in your particular area.
Thank you, Geoffrey. In transition to the next question, you have named your message climate-friendly travel. Yet in your conversation, you use the word travel and tourism, and WTTC is travel and tourism. How come you selected climate-friendly travel and not tourism? I'm not questioning that in the sense of questioning your judgment. I would like to have your vision in it. I know Secretary General of the United Nations also has used this climate change friendly. So I would like to have your comments for the audience.
Well, yeah, let me take two parts. The travel and tourism component, I'll take that first, even though it's the second part, then I'll deal with the friendly part. The travel and tourism part, I would say it's because I'm not so disciplined. We had to have a word. We had to have something which people could understand. And I know when we started WTTC in the 1990s, people wanted us to become the World Tourism Council. Our mutual friend who was running UNWTO, Antonio Savignac in those days, I had a long conversation with him. the members of WTTC wanted us to say travel and tourism because they felt that tourism generally gave the impression of leisure travel. And 25% of tourism is business travel. It's a different form of activity. And also, as we've got into the discussion over the years of the impact of sustainability, there's a very discrete set of discussions around the transport component. UNWTO produced a very good and extensive report on this last year at the Madrid COP meeting with the International Transport Forum. And it seems that in the climate context, the transport component of travel and tourism is quite a significant part. So in putting a name together, we didn't want to say travel and tourism, because if you say travel and tourism, it's kind of like a mouthful, and we wanted to, so we said travel. It could have been tourism, it could have been travel. That was how we got to travel. As to the friendly, this is very deliberate. I believe that the scar that Greta Thunberg is pushing away at has a lot of resonance with the public. I think the public believes that our activities are not good for the climate. And I think the argumentation that we have used has been not very clever. And I wanted to get an expression that was positive, that we want a kind of travel which has to be friendly to the climate. And then if it is, I would be the first person to step up to Greta Thunberg or anybody else and say, if an airline meets its obligations, quote unquote, in relation to the SDGs, if an airline ensures that it can meet the Paris 1.5 targets by its activity, you shouldn't have flight shame. Now, there may be other aspects, over-tourism, capacity management, impacts on local populations. Yes, that's a different issue, but from a climate perspective, if we make our share of the human contribution as defined under the Paris Agreement, people should not be anti-travel. So the concept of climate friendly has a very, there's a clear PR angle to it. We want it to be seen as positive if you move in this direction.
Whether travel or tourism, it's very clear that it has to be climate friendly. So I take it. It's wonderful. We have room for a couple of more questions.
Hey, I can see that light. Somebody, Jorge Ramos, has said there's a light shining over me. I think it might well be from the aiming mechanism on one of a Donald Trump supporter's scope in his rifle.
Professor Geoffrey, I want to ask a question.
Hi, Farhad.
I'm Farhad Nazir. I'm PhD student at University of Coimbra, Portugal. I'm from Pakistan. So I want to ask that here we are talking about sustainability and climate friendly and climate action. So what about a country like Pakistan? We are facing a situation that we do not have tourist arrival, and we are not facing the over tourism and mass tourism. So the thing you are talking about, sustainability and climate action. So if we want to apply those models here in Pakistan, so already we are facing the issues of tourist arrival. So is it applicable here in Pakistan? Because we require more tourists. So if we focus on the climate action and sustainability, then what will be our guidelines to do so?
Thanks for the question. I mean, from my perspective, everybody has to apply these criteria to its own situation. Now, the starting point for Pakistan is not tourism, Pakistan has filed, like every other country who has adhered to the Paris Agreement, what is called a nationally determined contribution of carbon reduction. For my money, that is the first determinant. Secondly, Pakistan will have developed inside its government framework an SDG-related plan for 2030. I believe the tourism sector inside Pakistan should be using these as the primary components as they reformulate their tourism in a post-COVID era. And yes, develop plans to increase numbers, but make sure that the carbon and greenhouse gas impacts are reduced, are fit within Pakistan's plan. Now, I can't tell you what that is because I don't know what Pakistan's plan is, but I would say, for example, an airline like Qatar Airways, buying the most modern equipment, no doubt applying the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, CORSIA plan for carbon reductions, which takes also offsets for the passengers' carbon. That airline would be a great airline to try to have more flights to Pakistan. And these are things which the specialists have to look at and not just say, how can we get more flights at lower fares to put more people into place? When people are doing destination management, they should look at which SDGs are most relevant for their requirements right at the beginning of the product development stage, and not somewhere at the end say, have we taken account of sustainable development? They have to take its account in the beginning. And yes, develop an aggressive growth plan by all means, but that growth plan should have the SDGs and the Paris targets built in from the beginning. And there should be consultation between the tourism ministry and the environment ministry. The strategy should be made open and public, and the government strategy should be filed on our registry so that people inside Pakistan and people who want to deal with Pakistan can review this situation. And then the product development, the marketing, the transformation of destination facilities, that's local. I mean, local in the sense that experts inside Pakistan, and particularly local communities, have to have their say in how this should be. Some communities may want to have lots of tourism. Other communities may say, you know, we've seen what was happening in Barcelona. We've seen what happened in Agra, in India, and at the Taj Mahal. We've seen how they're dealing with numbers of tourists at monuments in Egypt. Let's build that in from the beginning. Let's not throw it in at the end of the day. Let's not just take more low-fare airlines because that brings more people. Let's not just have cruise ships come to the major ports without looking at the implications of that in terms of impact on local populations. And it's a planning process, and it's an integrated planning process. My view, that's all. You know,
thank you, Professor.
I believe that at the end, the ultimate determinant has to be the local community, because you can benignly say tourism is good for you, but they may not like it. I did some work in Bali with colleagues from Australia, and the national government desire was to put more tourists into Bali. But if you talk to the local communities, they had a lot of reservations about it. They didn't like the Australian tourists coming along and like British tourists in the Algarve, drink, nightclubs. It didn't fit with their culture or their religious discipline. They didn't like large buses going down the narrow lanes in Bali where they had their temples outside their houses. Nobody had consulted with them. I think it's really important that the future tourism has to sort of always take those local issues into account.
Thank you very much.